Almost every recruiter I know spends way too much of their time stressed out. They are stressing balls about, is this deal going to close? Is that deal going to close? What's going to happen next quarter? How am I going to deal with feast and famine? All that sort of very common day-to-day stuff. Now, not everybody's in that situation, and it really, really doesn't have to be that way. But almost every recruiter I know experiences that as a day-to-day part of their job, that sort of stress, not the stress of wanting to achieve, but the stress of, oh shit, what's going to happen next? And oh, what after this one, what comes now? What am I going to do next month? What am I going to do next quarter? And it genuinely really doesn't have to be that way. So this topic is, hands up, full disclosure, not sexy sounding. It is, however, absolutely true and absolutely crucial. I'm going to give you some home truths, and then I'm going to give you two solutions. The solutions are, again, not sexy, but the results are sexy as all hell. The results are minimizing your stress as far as you can, given that we work in a business where we have two products, which are human beings, both of whom can say no at any given time for reasons completely out of our control and completely beyond their expectation and awareness. It is quite common for a candidate to drop out because of something domestic that they haven't seen coming. Equally, it's quite common for a client to pull back on a hiring case because of stuff that happens in a different division or a different part of the business, or because of an acquisition or whatever. So there will be stuff that makes you go, oh God. Yes, there will. But the majority of recruiters' stress doesn't come from that stuff. It comes from, oh, where am I going to go with this deal? What happens next? Is it going to close? And once this deal's closed, what the hell am I going to do now? What the hell am I going to do next quarter? So here's the causes, first of all. This is going to be quite a brief session, but powerful, I think. The causes are really simple. Firstly, the problem of feast and famine, which way too many recruiters go through. And the reason for that is you make the placement, you focus on the interviews, you focus on the send outs, you focus on getting everything sorted, you focus on managing all the counter offer and all the deal, and you make the placement and you send the invoice and you go, yay, and maybe you shout, maybe you pop a champagne cork, and then you go, oh, well, what's next? That really is avoidable. If you followed any of the straight line recruitment modules, if you have looked at the machine that we did the other day in the weekly webinar Wonderland, you'll have a very strong understanding that the way to avoid feast and famine is to avoid famine. It's very simple. Just have all feast. The way to avoid feast and famine is to have a steady deal flow. In mergers and acquisitions, it's called deal flow. It's pretty much the same in my mind. If you have a steady throughput of the right kind of candidates and the right kind of prospects. Personally, I bring in the right kind of candidates and I just do it through my Dripify machine. I do it through LinkedIn, Dripify, direct messages, pre-qualification call. That's my candidate deal flow machine. My prospect deal flow machine has two parts. My prospect deal flow machine is precisely the same: LinkedIn, Dripify, DM, quick qualification chat turns into a business conversation. Or it's take the candidates that come through the pre-qual, e-shot them out, the conversations that flow from that become my prospect deal flow. And if I've got enough candidates coming through and enough e-shots going out and enough conversations with prospects, decision makers within prospects, I make a placement and turn around and go, next. And that's as stressy as it gets. And that's not because I'm some kind of god or guru of recruitment. Obviously, clearly I am, but that's not the secret. The secret is I've just done the really dull, methodical, boring piece. I sent my Dripify sequence over to one of my clients earlier on this week, in the full expectation that they're going to need to amend it a little bit for their markets. But if anybody wants my Dripify sequence, you're very welcome to have it. I will send it over to you. It's the exact opposite of a trade secret. But that simple Dripify, LinkedIn connection, DMs, pre-qualification conversation, that gives me my candidate flow. And if I've got candidate flow, it's relatively easy to bring in job order and prospect flow, because my candidates open doors to the conversations lead to job orders, the job orders lead to placements, the placements go back to the beginning, run through. So you've all come across, I expect, the concept of a sales pipeline or a sales funnel. Most people really don't get it in this context, but this in fact is the perfect context for it. Most people think of sales funnels as in me selling the academy, or somebody selling training courses, or people selling personal development, or whatever it might be. People, set up your own coaching business. It's a lot harder than it sounds, but all that sort of stuff. Yeah, that's a valid sales funnel. Adverts on Facebook, sales page, email sequence, booking, course. That's a sales funnel. But equally, define a niche, LinkedIn connection email. I've got an idea I'd like your opinion on, DM, follow-up DM, pre-qualification call. That is equally a sales pipeline or a sales funnel. Funnel is a pretty appropriate term for it. It starts out wide and gets narrow at the end. However, what you can do is to turn the funnel from that to that. So more and more of what goes in at the top comes out the bottom in the form of placements. That's just a matter of tweaking the basic process. But the first rule, the first way to avoid stress and to manage your pipeline is to manage your pipeline so that you don't have stress. Put enough time, effort, and boredom, frankly, into the really nerdy bit at the start. Unless you happen to enjoy bashing the phone and monstering the cold calling, in which case, God bless you, replace my Dripify sequence with that. Whatever works for you, but as long as you have enough deal flow of qualified prospects, qualified job orders, qualified prospects coming through the pipeline, you literally get to the end of the placement, turn around and go, great, what's next? What's coming through? So you don't experience that feast and famine. So by all means, issue the invoice, pop the champagne cork. The following morning, crack on with the next one, and the next one, and the next one. Alternatively, deal falls over at the last hurdle. It happens. Oh, damn. Next. There's an old expression that a friend of mine taught me about dating many, many years ago, which is that nothing gets you over the last one like the next one. Well, nothing gets you over the last placement that didn't happen like the next one that's likely to. So simply make sure you've got enough opportunities coming through the pipeline. That deals with the first issue, which is feast and famine. The second issue is, oh my God, I don't know if it's going to place or not. I don't know. Well, having enough deals coming through the pipeline takes the angsty stress away from that because, if it doesn't close, what the hell, I've got another 8 coming through. As a rough rule of thumb, by the way, at any given time, I'm probably running between 10 and 12 candidates and potential deals through the pipeline at any given time. And I don't mean talking to candidates. I mean, I've got interview requests or interviews in progress and people actually in process, people going up on my Trello board and being tracked. So if I've got 10 or a dozen coming through and this one falls over, okay, that's fine. I've got another 10 or a dozen to follow it. I don't have time or desire to get stressy about that one. Don't get me wrong. I will have a look at it and see what I could have done to prevent it, see what I could have done differently to get a different result. But it's not going to make my heart bleed. It's not going to set my pulse racing or get a flush on my face because it's just, like they said in Wall Street, don't get emotional about stock. It's just another deal. It happens, it doesn't happen. So that's rule one. Second way is most recruiters, hopefully not you, hopefully you've been working your way through straight line recruitment and the other modules and the other lessons within the academy, and you are working a process. You send out your interviews, you get the interview request, you set up the interview, you then prep candidate, prep client. Interview happens. You debrief candidate, you debrief client. You follow a checklist for what happens on each brief and debrief. You actually plan everything so it happens in sequence. Each thing has a little tick list, each thing has a checklist. In my case, I do it all on the Trello board. Everything works its way through the process. What the hell's that got to do with managing my pipeline? Really simple. The more thorough you are at every stage, the less likely each deal is to fall over. So if you have a checklist for what candidate prep looks like, and you have a checklist for what client's prep looks like, everything from the most simple, do they know where they're going and what the dress code is, to what are they trying to achieve? How will they know when they've found it? What does the ideal candidate look like? What does a candidate from hell look like? If you've prepped the client and the candidate properly, you've maximized the chance of the meeting going well. Equally, when you debrief, you find out what they like, what they didn't like. You find out what they should build on next time, what they should minimize next time. You repeat the issues of how do they convince each other that this is the right opportunity, that this is the right person. And you tick off the boxes. I know this sounds dull, but quite often a dull process leads to exciting results. So if you've prepped properly, both sides, if you've debriefed properly, both sides, if you set up the second meeting properly, brief, debrief, the more of those things that you have done comprehensively and accurately, the better the probability that the deal is going to happen. Oh, yeah, that's bloody obvious, Stephen. Yes, it is. But common sense is very, very rarely common practice. So if you track those things through and you just run that process over time and you get some deals that fall out, it will happen. You've got a product that can say no in the form of the client, and you've got product that can say no in the form of the candidate. You're going to have stuff that happens no matter how well you do the process. That's the reality of it. Anyone that says you can run a process and never have a candidate go wrong, we can run a process and never have a role pulled, they're selling you something. Don't buy it. Okay? Stuff will happen because you're dealing with human beings. But what you can do, what I do, is I make sure I prep and I debrief both sides. And I make sure that I prep and I debrief both sides. I very thoroughly make sure that I've done everything I need to do in those stages. And what I can then do is just track if and when I get problems. And what you'll get very quickly, you'll only need 3 or 4 cases of things going wrong, and you will very quickly see if there's an issue in your process, if there's an issue in your straight line process that you need to improve on, or if it's just weird people stuff, which you'll get weird people stuff, accept it. But what you can do is maximize the probability of everything going through on rails. If you do every step properly, if you do every step right, you have maximized the chance of making the deal. If you miss a step, you'll drop the probability dramatically. I used to think it was only a little bit. It's not. It's dramatic. I've measured it in my own performance. If I miss, particularly, this sounds weird, but if I miss candidate debrief or client prep, if I miss either of those out, my success rate just crashes dramatically, like 40% difference. I can see why. As a psychologist, I get it. You know, if the candidate isn't really have the greatness of this opportunity, bearing in mind I'm a headhunter, so they're not actively in the marketplace. If I haven't done my best to keep them excited all the way through the process, to build up the positives and minimize the risks and the negatives, if I don't keep that momentum going, there's a very good chance that they will just stay where they are, because better the devil you know. In order for somebody to change job when they're not actively unhappy, you have to maximize the opportunity and minimize the risk. So by not doing candidate debrief after the meeting, I'm not maximizing the opportunity and minimizing the risk. I'm just letting things take their course. If I don't prep the clients really thoroughly, I want to be polite about this, but we're all recruiters, so I won't be. If I don't prep the clients thoroughly beforehand, most of them screw it up. Because interviewing, with a few exceptions, there are some interviewers who will happily accept. Jerome and I were just talking about somebody who will turn around and say, "Yeah, I need help with interviewing. I need some guidance. I need some coaching." But most people who do interviews, it's like driving and making love. If you ask anybody, they think they're amazing in bed, a great driver, and they interview brilliantly. The reality is not always the case. You've seen interviewers, you may have been interviewed by people who haven't got a clue what they're doing and shouldn't be allowed within 1,000,000 miles of that activity. You've been on the road when you think, how on God's earth did you actually pass your test? What the hell are you doing? And I'm not going to ask about the other elements, but we've all been there with people who think they're amazing at something and they're really not. That's why client prep, making sure that they know how to sell the opportunity to the candidate, knowing that they are prepped, they've read the CV and the profile, they know the person's history, they know what's going on, they know why they're doing such a good job, they know what will make them think about moving. If I haven't covered off the basics, that's not a thorough list, by the way. The checklist is within the Influence Academy. But if I haven't covered off the core elements with the clients before the meeting, it cans my results. If I don't follow up with the candidate as quickly as possible after the meeting, it cans my results. So that's for me. It may be different for you, but the only way for you to know is to do something very simple. Standardize what you do and the way you do it. So do your prep and debrief exactly the same way, cover exactly the same ground each time. And then when stuff happens and you can't prep the client or you can't debrief the candidate or whatever it might be, that is when you start to check what's happening with your results. Because you've then got two checks. You've got a quantitative check, as in the numbers. If I tick all these boxes, I get X result. If I miss these boxes, I get Y result. That tells you very quickly with the numbers what's working, what isn't. If you can't see anything there to improve, you then go back to the qualitative. And that's not easy to say after a long day on the phone. You go back to the qualitative elements, which is how well did I do this checklist? How well did I prep? How well did I debrief? How well and how often did I handle the counteroffer before it came up? Because you don't handle counteroffers afterwards, you handle counteroffers before. You inoculate against counteroffers repeatedly. So if I miss any of these, what happens to my results? And let me check how well I've done these things. So having a checklist for did I do it, and having your own notes for how well you did it and how thoroughly you did it. And the check of that is really simple. If you're prepping somebody and you don't have a lot of notes, you skimmed it. You just did. If you're debriefing somebody and you aren't covering a page of notes on each side, you're probably skimping on it. You're not digging. You're not doing enough precision to find out what they really think and feel. So have the process nailed. Have the process strictly designed. Then make sure you follow the process. On the odd occasion that you can't follow the process because they won't let you, oh God, I did air quote, sorry. On the odd occasion that they won't let you or circumstances intervene, see what happens to your numbers. And constantly keep an eye on how well you're doing. Because there's what you do and how you do it. And that's the combination that leads to success. So, pipeline. 1, have enough deal flow, enough candidates who are qualified, enough prospects who are qualified, enough e-shots going out. That will minimize your stress because if something falls over, you've got another taxi coming along in 5 minutes' time. It doesn't matter. If you get a success and yes, champagne corks, hurrah! What's next? Oh, it's these 10 coming down. Yeah? You can avoid feast and famine, and you avoid that sort of roller coaster effect because you've got the next one coming through. Secondly, manage your actual pipeline, the steps within the pipeline, and manage the hell out of the numbers, the conversion rate being what happens between step 1 and step 2, step 2 and step 3, step 3 and step 4, those conversion rates, and manage the hell out of the quality. Now, I gave you an example earlier of a sales funnel. The way I promote the academy, it's changing dramatically over the next 2 months. In September, you probably won't be able to go on any kind of social media without seeing a big bang from us. And if you weren't a member, you will be seeing emails. You just will, because we're changing what we're doing dramatically. But let me apply the same sort of pipeline strictures to that. So let's say that we connect with someone on LinkedIn, we send them out a DM, we pick up their email address, we send them an email. What have we got with that? Well, with that, we've got, okay, do they open it? Which tells us about the subject line. If they open it, do they click on the link or links? That tells us about the copy within it and whether we've done it right. Okay, next email, do they open it? That tells us two things, subject line and did we turn them off like a light bulb with email 1? And you A/B test each of those. You change the copy, you take the copy from 75 words to 750 words. No, you don't, but you change the copy length, you change the angle, you change whether it's got images or not, you change whether it's got links in it or not, you change where those links go to. You eventually change the page that people see before they sign up. You change the page that people actually put their credit card details into, and you A/B test, C/D test every single step. You change every subject line, you change the sequence, you change the wording, you change the photos, you change everything, and you measure the living hell out of it. If any of you lovely people see either Alex Hormozy or Diary of a CEO, I'll tell you about the YouTube as an example, but the Hormozys, Leela and Alex Hormozy, in any given month, not a year, not a decade, a month, they run up to 10,000 variations of their basic ads and their basic content. That sounds like an impossible quantity, but it's actually just changing a word here, changing a word there, changing the color of a background, changing the thumbnail on it. Simple as that. With Diary of a CEO, which has gone from nowhere to being ubiquitous on almost everybody's YouTube, that's done entirely on micro testing. For every single weekly podcast that goes out of Stephen Bartlett's Diary of a CEO, they will run up to 500 different thumbnails on YouTube. 500 different thumbnails for a single episode in a single day. Now, you and I can't do that. That's industrial scale. That's having an entire marketing division behind you. But the principle holds true. Measure, test, change. Change what you're doing, test the results by measuring it. Change it again, test and measure. Change it again, test and measure. At some point, you will optimize everything that you're doing. And at that point, you kick back in your sun lounger, you watch the sun setting into the horizon over your private beach, and you enjoy the fruits of your labors, because it won't be quick, but it can be done. And that is how you minimize stress and maximize success at the same time. Two ends of the pipeline, or rather, the start of the pipeline and every little step, every little conversion factor within the pipeline. Manage those two, and the end results, they won't take care of themselves because you've taken care of them all the way through. But the end results will be dramatically different to what you were getting when you started. It won't be quick to reach a final version. It won't. But you can see dramatic results faster than you expect. Simply changing your Dripify sequence at the start will yield you dramatic results in less than a month. Actually, probably less than a fortnight if you do it right. Managing your process, actually, the first stage is to make sure you have a process for your interviews and for your e-shots and your interviews and your prep and debrief. Making sure you've got a process for all of that will dramatically pump your results up if you're coming from relying on flair. I'm instinctively good at recruiting. I automatically know exactly what I'm doing. Yeah, good luck. Let's see how long that lasts. There are people who are instinctively good at recruiting for a while. Boring works. Yeah. Let me give you a final metaphor because I told you the other week all about metaphors. A friend of mine is without a doubt the most interesting man in the world, bar none. He was in the British Special Forces, actually the Special Boat Squadron, in the 80s, 90s, and he re-upped to go back to Iraq and Afghanistan as a special contractor in the early days of the conflicts there, because of his specialized expertise. He is somebody who buys sports cars. He buys Ferraris and Lamborghinis out of the factory and then sells them at a massive profit 2 weeks before they're actually delivered. He is a venture capitalist. He runs his own private equity firm and angel investments. Just as a sideline, he is what's called a Steadicam operator for Hollywood movies. So if you ever watch the first 3 Bourne movies, he was a Steadicam operator following Matt Damon around, Jason Bourne around train stations in London, getting all that stuff. He did all the Steadicam work for 28 days later. That's his kind of, don't get me wrong, he gets paid quite well for it, but that's his hobby. Yeah? He's the most interesting man in the world. And some of the stories, oh my God. Oh my God. Anyway, he came up with this analogy that just bang, really hammered me, which was that he said that sales and marketing is a lot like clearing a building if you're in special forces. Like, the hell are you talking about? It's okay. If you go in a building, said you don't just go in the door and go through to the back door. So what you do is, imagine it's a corridor, you go through, you clear that room, you make sure it's safe, you close the door behind you. Door on the left, clear it, close the door, move on to the next one. Door on the right, clear it, close the door behind you. So selling is like that. You close off each step and make sure it doesn't come round to bite you in the bum later. And if you take that view of recruitment, you will do a hell of a lot better than 99% of our recruitment colleagues out there. Just close the door, clear the problem, make sure you've done everything thoroughly, close the door behind you, and carry on with the rest of the journey. And that is me, and that was how to manage your pipeline.